In 1880, a 60-year-old woman, Marian Evans, was on honeymoon in Venice with her 40-year-old husband. This was the final scandal in the extraordinary life of Marian Evans, which shocked and fascinated Victorian society. In her lifetime, she was known by 5 different names. Today, we know her as one of the greatest writers in our history.
Of course, some said that her new husband might have preferred a night in the canal to a night with his ancient new bride.
They say that her love of music is only matched by her appetites in the boudoir, and she listens to music several times a day.
When someone is born in the country, they necessarily have the hungers of the farmyard.
This is Marian Evans, when she was 40 years old, a fearless woman who broke the rules of Victorian life. But under her pen name, George Eliot, she is a giant in our literary history. Middlemarch, The Mill on the Floss, and Adam Bede draw us into her world and into her mind. And yet, as a woman, she was a bit of a mystery. She was a great believer in the sanctity of family life and the loyalty of friends, but for years was an outcast from both. She treasured quiet intimacies, and yet she created scandal after scandal. This pattern of her life is mirrored in the pages of her novels. George Eliot shared a birth date, 1819, with another famous Victorian, the Queen herself. But their lives could not have been more different. Queen Victoria set the rules. George Eliot broke them. Her heroines in Middlemarch and Daniel Deronda are strong-willed and compassionate. In Silas Marner and The Mill on the Floss, people struggle hard to do the right thing. Readers could see their own lives and problems in the pages of a novel. George Eliot, the social outcast, became the celebrated chronicler of her times. Even Queen Victoria treasured her autograph. The woman who became George Eliot began life in Warwickshire as plain Mary Ann Evans. She loved her sister and mother, but her brother and father dominated her life. Her father doted on his youngest child, but he knew that she'd have to get by on her cleverness, not her looks.
I was a very pious young woman, always tried to be the best at everything. The cleverest girl at school, the most loyal friend, the most hard-working parishioner, the most devout of all believers. Perhaps it was all to gain my father's attention, his approval.
Of all her books, The Mill on the Floss is the one closest to Mary Ann's own life. It tells the story of clever, plain Maggie Tulliver.
You catch it, you will. Do it!
Her brother and her father, both God-fearing and unforgiving, rule the mill where they live. But Maggie's far too headstrong to be the perfect daughter forever.
Oh! You wicked girl! Oh! You'll break your mother's heart!
You were right to cut it off if it plagued you. Father will take your part.
But when Mary Ann rebelled, her God-fearing father definitely did not take her part. At the age of 22, she stopped going to church. These days, it's hard to imagine how shocking it was for a young girl to give up her faith. She was, in a way, marking herself out as sinful and dangerous. Stay away, do not touch. For her family and for her marriage prospects, this was a disaster. Mary Ann wanted and needed a husband as much as the next girl. She knew that the eligible bachelors of the parish would never want a godless wife, but she wouldn't relent.
I dread to think what will become of her.
It's our Christian duty to think about it, as a warning.
While most young women of her age were studying embroidery, she'd been studying foreign books and dangerous new ideas.
Misery, possibly madness, certainly fornication.
To her, the Anglican Church was intolerant and unforgiving. She felt she had no choice but to leave it, whatever the cost.
Licentiousness, deceit, greed,
Envy, unholy language. Fornication.
Mary Ann's father was devastated. It must have seemed like she was damned in this world and the next.
And at the end of it all, hell, eternal damnation.
Women like Mary Ann were always financially dependent on men. If she wasn't going to find a husband, what would she do with her future?
Father, I would cheerfully brave anything to give you a moment's joy, but I cannot attend church. The scriptures mingle truth and fiction, and I cannot support their doctrines. Please, Father, speak. Do not condemn me with this ice. I fear nothing but voluntarily leaving you. If ever I loved you, I do so now. Father, please. Please.
Poor father, stuck with a great dollop like her. I shouldn't wonder he'll fall into an early grave with the worry.
Hungry for new ideas and stimulation, Mary Ann fled the nest. She came under the influence of Charles and Cara Bray, a bohemian couple who had an open marriage and mixed with writers and intellectuals. What would the good burghers of Warwickshire think? Mary Ann lapped it up. With astonishing ease, she taught herself modern languages, ancient languages, philosophy, theology, history.
Descartes. Il admet en effet que l'âme ou l'esprit est une...
Nothing was too difficult for her.
La glande dite pinéale.
No wonder Charles Bray was so intrigued by her.
Le moindre
He
mouvement
thought
de
she had the
l'esprit
skull of a genius. And she did. Mary Ann started translating The Life of Jesus, a dense work of theology. 1,500 pages of German, with quotations in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, questioning the truth of the Gospels themselves. You can imagine how her father must have felt. When The Life of Jesus was published, her reputation as a brilliant free thinker started to spread. For him, it must have marked her out to the world as a heretic. The Gospels were the foundation of all his beliefs, and here was his daughter questioning them. But Mary Ann longed to be reconciled to him. When he became ill, she rushed home to care for him. For 3 years, she was a devoted and uncomplaining nurse. But Robert Evans died, never having forgiven his daughter, for their holy war.